College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports have you covered. Beginning right now.
And a good morning if you're listening to us live. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're listening to us. The house band brings us in College Football Forever, the anthem that you know and love. JC and Morgan, the show that you know and love, now with episode number 270 if you're scoring at home. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome, JC Shurburtt, whatever time it might be in Chicago. I think it's only a 1 hour difference, but I don't know what's going on in that crazy windy city of yours.
Yeah, it's the time changed over the weekend. It didn't see. It usually seems like it used to happen in April, but a little early this year.
Very early,
but it kind of kicked my butt, because I get up early in the morning and do another podcast, and I get a lot done before everybody else gets up around my house. And I got up Sunday actually to do work, and about noon, I looked at the clock. It was noon, and I was like dragging. I was like, "What the?" It was because I got up at 3:00 in the morning, an hour and a half early before I normally do. But yeah, it was nice weather in Chicago this week. I wish it was next week for the first week of March Madness, because I always enjoy. I lived in the South. That was kind of the first week where you could kiss the winter weather for the most part goodbye down south. March Madness week. It's nice outside. It started to get warm, but up here, obviously, it's going to snow in April like it always does. So it's like, kiss it goodbye. But this week's in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and sunny, and feels like home this week. But certainly good to be back talking a little college football, and can't wait to on the 1 year anniversary, Mike, of talking to our guest today.
Yeah.
So we talked to him on this same week last year. I remember because I was on the road. Good to catch up with him. New job and all. So good. Looking forward to talking to Dan Wetzel later.
Yeah, for those that follow us on social media and the Chief app and get frequent updates on stuff, we were going to do this show and have Dan on last week. And then all of a sudden, Dan's very good. I've known him for a few years now of kind of responding to text messages, and all of a sudden it kind of went dark. And I said, And then I go on my Twitter account, at Morgan On Air, at JC Shurburtt, and I see Dan Wetzel just left Yahoo for ESPN. So I said, okay, that certainly is justifiable, Dan. You got a lot on your plate. Let's just do this next week. So we do it today. Dan, an excellent writer, has written a number of books, covers college football, college basketball. He, too, has been doing a podcast for years now with Ross Dellinger, who we've also had on. I don't know if that's going to happen anymore. I doubt that's going to, let's just say some bosses don't like on-air talent to cross-pollinate with other entities. But regardless, we'll have Dan on, and we'll just pick his brain on a number of things. I want to pick your brain on the JC5, JC, so let's get it cranked up.
It's time for the top topics in the sport. We bring the JC5. Number 1.
JC, we got to get that mic going, and then we'll be totally ready for the JC5.
That was me because I hit the mute button while I was looking at the email. My bad on that.
You're good.
Well, thankfully I don't have to restart my computer, right? So, Mike, there was some coaching news recently. Bowling Green Open. Scott Loeffler, who I guess had some good moments with some close calls last year there. He leaves and takes an assistant job at the NFL level, not even a coordinator. So he bolts from Bowling Green, and they go to Tennessee State and hire Eddie George. So you got Eddie George now at Bowling Green. Mike Vick is at Norfolk State. You got Dion. Is this something we're going to see a trend of? I mean, it's not – I don't think former players being head coaches is anything new. Former NFL guys being college coaches or head coaches in the NFL. In fact, a lot of them are. What's new is these are big, big, big names. Like, I'm old enough to remember when Magic Johnson coached the Lakers for a while, or when Michael Jordan coach the Hornets for a little bit, or the Bobcats?
Well, he was in the front office.
Front office. Okay.
Yeah.
So and a lot of times the big names don't necessarily translate to great coaches, but Eddie George did a really good job at Tennessee State. And now he's got Bowling Green, so he's moving right up the ladder. Of course, Deion started at Jackson State. These guys seem to be willing to put in their dues at places that don't have a lot of resources. I mean, honestly, those guys' net worth probably is greater than the value of the whole athletics department at Norfolk State, Jackson State, Tennessee State, Bowling Green, places like that. But I wanted to get your overall thought. Are we going to see more and more big names, like guys that we watched today? Man, those guys are great.
Yeah.
Becoming head coaches at the college level.
It's going to be interesting. Gosh, the last time I saw Eddie George was when I was at Fox, the college football seminar, and he was out there and kind of bursting on the scene in his broadcasting career. And then for whatever reason, that didn't exactly take off, I guess. And so he's making a pivot and doing what a lot of these guys want to do. They want to wake up and still be around the game. And in this case, you don't have to wear a coat and tie and actually go to production meetings and all that nonsense. You can just coach ball. I think now it's more attractive in football. I think now it's more attractive that the college game resembles the NFL more than it ever has. We're paying players. We have free agency. We're treating these guys basically like minor league football players. Some would say we always have, but it was hidden. It's out there now. I mean, look, for example, Deion Sanders is not doing any of the work in recruiting. They're a portal program. Deion gets the data, and they have a lot of support staff over there in Boulder for Deion Sanders. And he just starts trying to gobble up. So, okay, how much money we have, kind of a self-imposed salary cap, and then starts buying players. And so that's more attractive. Most of these coaches don't want to deal with recruiting and kissing the rear end of a 17-year-old high school kid. They don't want to mess with it at all. But now you don't have to do that. So, and you mentioned paying your dues. Coaching a couple of years at Jackson State compared to coaching in the MEAC and then going to Bowling Green, now that's really paying dues. So I'm giving Eddie George a little bit more of a tip of the hat here, because that's a really difficult job. And you're still at a level where you're not going to have like inherent advantages where I've got more money than the rest of these guys. No, it's the MAC, baby. You're all on equal footing, and you are going to have to do a lot of that hard work. So I think it's encouraging. Eddie's always been a very likable, charismatic guy. I love it. I hope Eddie succeeds. I hope he wins a MAC title, and if he does, there'll be programs lining up to hire him.
I'll say this too, Mike. One of the key parts of this, especially the smaller schools, fundraising. You can really maximize not only your donor base, which is, let's face it, Bowling Green and Norfolk State and those places don't have gigantic fundraising bases. You can expand it a little bit, especially local people that just kind of, Eddie George, because those guys are good fundraisers. They're famous, and that's why celebrities, you don't ever see a telethon that you didn't watch the Jerry Lewis telethon. And it's guys like me and you on there that nobody's ever heard of. Actually, we're somewhere on the Z list, Mike. You're probably more on like the P list, the M list. I'm definitely Z list, but
the B list.
Somewhat known. But you don't see it. You see superstars, and so I think that's that's probably part of it too. But I certainly wish all those guys the best, because I think that's cool. I can appreciate wanting to stay around the game, and a guy that's a multimillionaire and famous taking the humble route of coaching the Bowling Green Falcons.
Let me tell you just real quick before we get to number 2. Let me tell you the sport this hasn't worked. Basketball. It has failed miserably. Chris Mullen, Patrick Ewing, Clyde Drexler, just
Larry
to name
Kristowiak at Utah got
Stoviak.
fired.
Yeah, I mean, you take NBA guys that wanted to coach college basketball and they didn't last. They couldn't hack it.
Only one doing okay is Penny Hardaway, but there's been a lot of years he's had a lot more talent than and then wins, you know.
Right. And to Penny's credit, he didn't take the express lane. He coached high school ball for years and paid his dues. Right? Like, I mean, he truly, I've talked to Penny about this. He's truly all in. It's not just like a shortcut. It's not something like he's just bored and wants to do, and he doesn't need the money. So I don't know whether or not it's going to work there at Memphis. They always have a ton of talent. He's going to recruit, and you got a great recruiting base right there. He's going to have some runs in the tournament to keep that fan base happy because they're still living in Calipari times where Memphis was going like 31-1 and competing for Final Fours every year. But we'll see. But basketball as a litmus test has been a no-go. We'll see if this becomes a trend. It's a great question.
Number 2.
All right, so I read on ESPN.com, Big 12, and this follows the Big 10 and the ACC. They don't do this in the SEC. The Big 12 announced 10 Friday night college football games. Now, let me just say this. Speaking of the Buffaloes, on that first weekend, Labor Day weekend, they have Georgia Tech at Colorado and Auburn at Baylor Friday nights. Special weekends like that, Thanksgiving weekend, Friday games don't bother me. I don't like them necessarily during the season. I agree with the people that say they kind of take away a little bit from high school football in certain areas. To me, Friday night in football it's not a college football night. Like I said, I get it special occasion wise. And I understand that it's television and it's almost an exclusive window to showcase your program. Where do you come down? Not necessarily from the business side, but from the nostalgic side of Friday night college football games.
You just added that caveat, which made me pause for a second.
Because I knew your answer was
you already know where I'm going. Yes.
I wanted to just say everybody understands money.
Well, yeah, money. From a TV standpoint, I'm not going to lie. I mean, I've done some Thursday and Friday night games, and I love them because I know no matter what the game is, we would draw a great number. Some people on this show and one of our sister shows have asked, well, what's the highest rated games you've ever done? And there's been a few basketball that are between $1 million, $1.5 million, which is great for a regular season college basketball game. There's been a couple of college baseball postseasons around 1.2 million, which again is insanely high for a niche sport. College football wise, if you do a Friday night game, I don't care what it is. It's going to draw a really good number. It's going to be well into 7 figures because it's an exclusive window. And for those of us that want to have college football every day, all the time, and I am one of them, it's good. So yes, I'm going to answer it non-business wise, like per your request. And I'm going to tell you that while I love high school football, okay, I played it, I've broadcasted it. I don't want to see the ruination of high school football. However, as a fan now, I don't go out of my way to watch high school football games in person, on TV, anywhere. I want a college, and I want it every damn day. And so I'm all for this, and I think it's smart by the Big 12 because the Big 12 is trying to carve out whatever audience it can in a battlefield, as we all know, that is dominated by the SEC and the Big Ten. The ACC has done this. They have played several games, conference games on Thursday and Friday night. It was only a matter of time before the big, excuse me, I get choked up when I talk about Friday night football. It was only a matter of time before the Big 12 said, we got to get a piece of this, and they have. So I'm here for it, JC. I'm here for it.
Yeah, the Big Ten's also been doing it for years. Illinois, Nebraska was on a Friday night. Here's one quick thing on it. I like Thursday night college football myself. Now because the NFL does Thursday all year now, they've kind of shied away. You get like an American conference game at best on a Thursday night. But yeah, it's an interesting question. All right, on to number 3.
Number 3.
Okay, the Matt rule. We don't want people tampering with players because of spring game film. There's been some brushback on that, right, Mike? So a lot of schools are saying, hell no, that's crazy. Dabo Swinney even said it. He laughed. And I'm with Dabo. I don't think you're recruiting anybody off of spring game film, and I think it's kind of paranoia. But guess what? I can appreciate college football coaches being paranoid. I would be too if I were them. It's like that movie Strange Days, Tom Sizemore. Lenny, the question is not if you're paranoid, is if you're paranoid enough. Do you see this? Because ESPN.com, their writers, of course, they want less football, all that. I'm convinced sometimes. Do you think this is just kind of a one-time, hey, blah, blah, blah? Or do you think we're really going to see eventually rules changes to where spring games go away and they provide some summertime off-season OTAs, and we just see it in? Because there is a conjunction with the calendar or in the portal and all that where the coaches not necessarily want to cancel their spring game, but do think a summertime type spring practice would be more beneficial. Where do you see this heading?
To be consistent, to go back to your last question, I love football 12 months out of the year. So spring football to me is a win for the fans. And yeah, it's not great football. You know, when I've done them, you go in there, you talk to the coaches, the players, they're going to tell you right off the bat, you know, we're going to play vanilla. We're not going to hit. We're not going to play this guy. We're not going to play that guy. I get it, but it gives us an excuse in a 2-hour window to basically do an infomercial for that particular school and to just go through the roster, go through the depth chart. It's a primer. It's a primer for the off season and the eventual fall. And so I like all that, even though the games have become progressively worse and worse. I think the whole notion of, well, I don't know if we even want to do this because I don't want my third string wideout that we believe is going to be a superstar. We don't want to put a shine on him. And then he gets crazy offers out of the portal. I think that's a little overrated. I think it's more about, quite frankly, coaches are just done with this. They're just done with spring games. See, it used to be like you really would settle, or not settle, but get a better idea of who your best guys were. There were true positional battles that the spring and then eventually the fall would help determine. I don't think there's much of that anymore. And I don't think coaches want to, risk an injury because they'll get second guessed about it to death. And B, I just don't know if they want to deal with all of the things, the effort that goes into this and talking to people and doing interviews and doing all that. I think they'd rather just be left alone and not do any spring game. So I hope I'm wrong. But what I see in the future is more and more coaches going, yeah, we're just not going to do it. And that's what you're seeing, JC. You're just seeing coaches just punting. Nope, no thanks. We're not going to do a spring game. Why not? Just don't feel like it. I don't have to give you an answer. We're not obligated to give you a spring game. And the advantage of the TV exposure that was there, these guys don't need that anymore,
Yeah, you don't really have any kind of advantage with television exposure. Okay, so we got 1 minute, so I'm going to combine.
Well, we're hoping that that he'll be good for 940.
Okay, well that's fine. Well then I'll go
Number
next.
4.
Number 4. All right, so Miami went 10-3 last year. Good year. They were in the hunt for the playoff, which has not happened in a while. So they got Carson Beck, who's allegedly one of the best players in the portal, replacing Cam Ward. Miami next year, still in the hunt or take a step back?
Take a step back. They also lost the Restrepo. I'm probably butchering that name. I'm a little rusty on his name, but he was easily their best wide receiver. They lost some linemen. Miami, they bulked up in the portal, got some good guys on the line of scrimmage, although that defense really never came together. So maybe the defense gets better, but they take a step back. speaking of taking a step back, Carson Beck took more than a step back. He took like a mile and a half backwards last year at Georgia. I don't know what it was. Here in Atlanta, you had more than a few people suggesting he kind of forgot who he was. He started dating one of the Cavender twins, got a Lambo, and lost his focus. It was like a B-rated movie where the star athlete just kind of loses what's important in life and what's important in his career and gets caught up in the glory. And we're not used to talking about that with college kids, but college kids didn't used to make over $1 million a year as a starting quarterback and have all these things given to you. And coming off a rock star season the year before, even though they fell short of the goal, remember it was Stetson Bennett that won those 2 titles, not Carson Beck. But Carson Beck he made awful decisions. He missed on key throws. I don't know what happened. So he's going to have to prove something to people like me again that he can play at an elite level. And assuming the ACC is even marginally better than it was a year ago, and that's not asking much, I'm not sure if Miami does not take a step back. Oh, by the way, Cam Ward, who knows what he's going to look like in the pros? He might be the number 1 pick. He might not be. He was extremely good last year at Miami. So it's hard for me to believe that they won't take a step back in quarterback production as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. You never know who else. I do expect some improvement on defense and a coordinator change and some things like that. I think it's up for debate if Carson Beck even gets drafted if he has another so-so year. If he wants to play pro football, which I don't know that I would even want to play pro football if I were him with as much money as he's made. I think he's really got to have a much better year, and I just don't know that he can do it. I think it's more likely he does not get drafted as of now than he does. All right, number 5. Julian Sayin, speaking of quarterbacks, he's probably the leader in the clubhouse at Ohio State. He'll be a redshirt freshman. They have a true freshman named Tavian St. Clair, who's awfully talented. They sign talented quarterbacks every single year, Mike, and then they've actually become a de facto farm system for other schools getting quarterbacks, So I read the other day he has Heisman odds, right? As a redshirt freshman.
Yeah.
Is that a little all right? So is that a little ridiculous, or is it not so ridiculous simply because he's going to have a great supporting cast led by one Jeremiah Smith, who's a freak?
Well, look, when Howard left Kansas State to go there, people weren't exactly buzzing about it, right? It's like, oh, okay, kid from K-State. I don't know. That might be good. That might be. By the end of the year, he wasn't a Heisman finalist, but he certainly had a good year, and it looks like he's going to have a pretty good shot at making it at the next level. So yeah, if you're in the cockpit of the controls of that offense at Ohio State, which always has one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, they are what Alabama used to be. In terms of every year you look up and first rounder, second rounder at the wideout position. They typically don't have a porous offensive line either. They typically have good running backs. They typically have everything. So yeah, it's not the craziest thing, JC. It's not the craziest thing. And speaking of conferences that need to pick it up, I mean, when you get past those top 3 or 4 programs, the bottom half of the Big Ten is brutal. It just wasn't good. I know they all got money. I don't know where they're spending it, but they're not getting enough of the quality players to come anywhere close to the top half. See, I mean, when Oklahoma, a very mediocre Oklahoma team, beats Alabama, when a Vanderbilt can compete and beat Alabama, and that's a sign of the SEC. The people, Alabama fans, well, that's a sign we missed Nick Saban. Yeah, I get it. But it's also a sign of the depth of that league. And for all the good, Big Ten's won back-to-back national championships, hats off. Michigan, Ohio State, legit, hats off. But the depth of that league is still not great. It's just not. And so you can go in, if you're the quarterback of Ohio State, you're going to have a lot of matchups against a lot of teams that simply cannot defend you and compete with you athletically. And so you're going to put up some numbers. So, yeah, I don't know a ton about the kid, JC. You know more following the recruiting the way you do. But if he's got the skill set that most of these kids that go to Columbus have, certainly he could put up terrific numbers with that offense.
Yeah, he was committed to Alabama or at Alabama as an early enrollee, and then got in the portal and left. To your point on the Big Ten, you're going to have, Rutgers is in kind of an overachieving period, but it's tough to get that going. It's tough to get Maryland going. Without a Jeff Brom, it's tough for Purdue to get going, although I respect Barry Odom and wish him well. The Big Ten needs Illinois to continue to be good. They need Michigan State, Wisconsin, Washington, Nebraska, and UCLA, and Iowa to beat. They all were kind of not so great last year.
Mm-hmm.
Very mediocre, which is why Indiana went 11-1.
Yeah.
I read the other day the key to Indiana, because they're still ranked, right? For some reason, improve the lines of scrimmage. So guess who said once he watched Indiana in the playoff, this team is bad on both lines of scrimmage and not even close to some of the teams that got left out. I said that. Somebody finally recognized it. I'm like, I don't know. You ever heard anybody talk about it when they were picking the playoff? But that's that there. But yeah, you're right about that with the Big Ten. I think the good news is we've seen Michigan State be great. We've seen Washington be great. We've seen Nebraska be great. Those programs, it's kind of like the ACC. There's a lot of programs in that league that have potential, but just for whatever reason, through time have gotten mediocre.
I've gotten mediocre. All right, good JC5. In just a few moments, we will speak with Dan Wetzel. I'm so used to saying Dan Wetzel of Yahoo. Now I'm saying Dan Wetzel of ESPN. It is JC and Morgan, and we are presented by MG&A Wealth for all your financial needs. Privately owned company since 1984. Salary-based advisors, meaning they're not just going to give you bad advice for commission. They're there to help you. That's what their reputation is based on. Give Sean a call today at 954-289-9000, 954-289-9000. You can also visit the website, mgawealth.com. Could be the best and most important phone call for you and your family that you're going to make from now until the rest of time. Our time will be spent with Dan Wetzel of ESPN. When we come back, it's more JC and Morgan after a quick timeout. Mike here for our friends at MG&A Wealth. It's never a bad time to have someone on your side for all your financial needs. You need a trustworthy partner who has a true understanding of your situation in order to help you with smart and practical solutions. Since 1984, MG&A Wealth has helped their clients manage not just their wealth, but their lives. Today, as a nationally recognized wealth management firm, their team of pros remains dedicated to serving your best interests with an emphasis on personal attention and customized solutions. MG&A Wealth has clients all across the country, and they all get results. Don't put it off any longer. Call our friends at MG&A Wealth at 954-289-9000. That's 954-289-9000. MGAwealth.com is the website. They do more than manage wealth. They help manage lives.
Low on energy? Struggling with inflammation and poor digestion? Try Encapsulate 6 Mushroom Blend and get back in the game. Our blend is specially formulated to promote overall wellness and maximize health benefits using 6 powerful functional mushrooms. Our science-forward approach offers the most potent and bioavailable mushroom supplement on the market, backed by third-party testing to ensure safety and efficacy. Order online on Amazon or encapsulateusa.com today to start your journey to better living. Enter promo code JCM for $10 off.
Hey, folks, want to tell you about our friends at Titan Construction Group really quick. They're a mid-Atlantic-based general contractor, specializes in retail, restaurant, and office construction. TCG strives to separate itself from other general contractors by adding value every step of the process. From project budgeting to estimation, value engineering to construction, they focus on those relationships and not the transaction. Titan builds partnerships one project at a time. Among their clients are Starbucks, Crumble Cookie, Blake Pizza, Home Goods, 15 plus years experience, based in Midlothian, Virginia, and contracted in Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. So get on their website, TitanCG.com, TitansCGinc.com. That's TitansCGinc.com. Get in touch with Brad if you're in need of a general contractor that focuses on going above and beyond for their clients. That's Titan Construction Group, a proud sponsor of the JC and Morgan podcast.
This is JC and Morgan
on the Chief Sports Network.
College football forever.
We love that dramatic final guitar riff before we come back on the show.
Sweet, isn't it? Yeah,
it's very nice. It's like,
hey, Dan's not in yet, is he?
He's not in at the moment.
Yeah, I want to respond to Greg and chat row over here. He says coaches are obviously concerned with tampering and excessive open evaluation, which makes sense. See, to me, it doesn't, because I have no idea what coach or evaluator worth a flip would look at spring game tape and say, we need that guy. I mean, think about the nature of spring games. The guys that are good, everybody knows they're good. You already know about them. Every one of these players that's on scholarship, you're not going to, there's no secrets,
right,
that you're going to uncover in spring game. The rules are different. I mean, I just don't find it. I find it a little disingenuous. Matt Rule likes to kind of run his mouth about what everybody else is doing when he does the same thing, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
He complains and gripes about the portal like it's this awful thing, yet you see Nebraska bringing in loads of talent from the portal every year. I mean, I'm sorry. I just don't agree with that at all. If it's injuries or something like that, fine. I get the injury thing totally.
Yeah.
But because that happens. But this notion that there's all these people out there scouting spring games. I mean, I'm sorry. It's just not. I mean, hey, if you don't want to let them into practice to scout your open practice, you don't have open practice. I get that. That's full.
Well, those are all closed now.
Yeah,
too.
Team good on good, 11 on 11,
yeah.
and then the other thing is, about setting the depth chart, the battles like you mentioned. There is a legit concern if you do a spring game that's first team versus second team or however you do it, and you just simply divide the teams up. I mean, that's how you fix that. But you don't want a depth chart because you don't want a player to get discouraged and say, well, I have no chance to start. I've lost this job. Yeah, right. Dramatic people are these days.
Yes.
I'm going to just go elsewhere because I lost. Whoa. Yes. And so I get that too. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I think, again, I think the bigger issue is coaches just don't want to deal with it. You hear coaches all the time talk about everything that's on their plate now in this new day and age of the portal and NIL and everything else, that it's now truly a 12-month out of the year job. Less and less golf, fewer trips to Destin, more and more having to do the management part of this job as you would if you were running an NFL franchise. And so I think that's the bigger issue. I don't think, oh my goodness, the fourth string wideout just caught 11 passes. Now, how are we going to be able to keep him? Well, you can always put your thumb on the scale and make somebody look good in the spring game. Just put him up against the third string DB and keep throwing to him as a primary target. And look at that. He's got great numbers.
That's exactly what I'd do. I'd be like, all right, this guy's making too much NIL money. He's not worth a flip. He doesn't work hard. Put Johnny Walk-On out there at corner. Nobody will know.
Yeah.
And let's run 9 routes to him all day and just let him be the MVP, and then be like, and then somebody else will come and offer him money. I mean, it's kind of like they do in the draft when they'll talk up a guy wanting to bait somebody else into taking them and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can use it to your advantage. But anyway, I know Dan's in, so let's get somebody smarter than I am about all this stuff.
Well, he's become even smarter now. He's joined the squad over at ESPN. At least that's what we'll tell him, that he's now smarter. Although I caught some of your podcasts I guess it was yesterday, right? Your swan song.
Yeah.
And you got a little resistance, huh? Some people jumped on you for jumping ship.
Yeah. Well, our podcast audience is very, very passionate, so they're a little
Yes.
disappointed. And yeah, I've been Yoko Ono, Benedict Arnold, Judas came in. I'm like, we're really getting there now.
Biblical.
Yeah, a little tough. But yeah, I will be joining ESPN next week. So
Well, in all
still a
seriousness-
Yahoo employee right now. So we got to hype Yahoo because they're paying me today.
Yes.
Yeah, let's there's allegiances go to my paycheck first. So
I know.
starting Monday, I'll be all about the worldwide leader.
You'll be all about.
No,
Yeah, well,
no.
it's funny. I was setting up. We when we have guests on, which we do quite a bit in the off season, we have to send out the invite, the Zoom invite, and I sent it to our producer, and I'm like, that's a Yahoo email address. I wonder if he's already changed it. But you're still a Yahoo email address. That's how we got to you.
I'll keep that thing. Yeah,
You'll
I'll
keep that thing,
Yeah.
and eventually you'll have an ESPN address as well.
But I want to get to this. I like this double cross of taking a guy you don't like, shining him up in the spring game,
Yeah.
getting somebody to bid. Then you can even complain to your boosters that they're not giving enough.
That's coming. I mean,
right? You can get like a triple whammy, and you're like,
yeah.
dude, we got rid of a bad locker room guy. Stuck. Have you ever seen the Larry David show or whatever? Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
We foisted him on somebody else. Depleted their NIL.
Right.
And now we're going to get a little more donations because our guys going to be irate.
Yeah.
We lost Johnny Superstar here. He has 8 catches. I think these coaches are missing the opportunity of the spring game. I think you guys are on it.
I didn't even think about that. Remember the old, you're a writer. This was years and years ago. There was a Sports Illustrated writer that made up a fictitious story about a baseball player and said he threw like 105 miles an hour and he this and that. But it was all apocryphal. I mean, he made it the whole story up. Wasn't even a real guy.
It was an April Fool's edition of Sports Illustrated. They thought America would get in on the joke.
Yeah.
And of course, no.
They did not.
No, they did not. And then but it was now you could get the word out very quickly, right?
Right.
So Sports Illustrated, if they were still coming out every week, it could do that. Then they say it was April Fool's, everyone would get it quickly. But no, it took like months. It took years for people to be like, where's this guy who's supposedly playing for the Mets?
What happened?
I think he was getting the Mets, and then the Mets were angry because all these fans were like, we've got this guy, and they're getting calls, and they're like, we've never heard of the dude. There's another famous one when Bob Knight was he didn't like the recruiting gurus saying, this is the number 5 player. So he invented and said he was signing a Russian big man named Ivan Renko. He was like supposedly basically like Nikola Jokic, like a generation ahead. He had spin moves and these shoulders, and he could hit jumpers, and he made this up, and then he waited, and sure enough, the recruiting gurus. Now these are when those newsletters would come out like monthly, so it would take a while. All of a sudden, Ivan Renko shows up as the number 4 player in the class of 19. Yes, so there's a little something here.
He was a 7-foot point guard. He would go to the center circle for the jump ball, and he would look at the opposing player, stare him down, and go, "You will lose," right before every game. It was beautiful.
I must break you.
I must break you right
Ivan
now.
Renko.
That's fantastic. Gosh, where do we start, Dan? But let me start with this. First off, how much is your role going to change? Because I saw the word investigative. Now, I know you've done some of that before. You've written books, but the reason why we've had you on before, I just love the job that you do covering college football and basketball and staying on top of a lot of the stories, particularly now more than ever, that are affecting the sport as we know it. I mean, we have paradigm shifts right now going on in college athletics that we've never seen, and you and Ross and some others have done a great job breaking those stories. So how does the focus for you change, if at all?
Well, I'll probably be able to speek better to that next week and soon. And so I don't want to misstate anything.
Fair enough.
But you look, I've been covering college athletics for, too long. It's been a long time since I was in college, but and I'll continue doing that. So what exactly that will be, I think I'll be probably writing. I would I think I can say more issue focused than necessarily like, at a game, that kind of game coverage, which is the stuff that I like. And I'll have more podcasting news soon.
Okay.
More specific stuff. But until then, I think I'll try not to get fired before I start.
Put you on the gag order.
Let's just lay low. Yeah.
All right. I understand. Fair.
Yeah.
Let's talk about stuff I know you can talk about. And we'll get into some basketball as well, too, because it is March Madness. It's Champ Week. It's a great time of year. We got kids from Wofford shooting granny free throws. We've got the SEC having a record year. We've got all types of coaching news and everything else. But it's been a couple weeks now since we mentioned the article from Ross, and I can't remember if you were a co-writer on that or not, but basically talking about the playoff format and what the goal is. And we've talked about on this show, I thought if the SEC didn't get that fourth team in from my sources, that you were going to see the Sankeys and Batitis of the world basically blow this thing up and say, you're now going to give us 4 automatic bids. We're going to take the guesswork out of this, and we're not going to have a committee of 13 people telling us that SMU is better than Team XYZ. Where do you see all this headed right now?
Well, there's certainly a belief, and I really think the idea came from the Big Ten of the 4 automatic bids. I'm not a fan of this. I think that's where this is headed. I think a 14-team playoff, four for the Big Ten, 4 for the SEC, 2 for the ACC, and 2 for the Big 12 and a 1 for the Group of 5 would be very possible. It's probably the most likely. My thing with this is, first off, we had 1 year of this playoff, and we're already overreacting to it.
Yeah.
Let it cook, please. Like, let's see what I wanted to see what we like, what don't we like, what there's always going to be things you're not really sure about. This to me would be a big reaction. The majority of time, those 2 leagues are going to get 8 of the teams in a 12-team playoff. It's just going to happen most of the time. But I would think, and so go out and compete for it. This is a dramatic altering of how not just college football, but all college sports is done. And so once you make 4 automatic bids, you change the scope of how the regular season will be competed for, because now it's just about making 4th place in your league. And there's talk of like, does championship weekend include teams 3 plays 6 and 4 plays 5, right? Which is basically a play-in. That's becomes a route. So now all you got to do is finish top 6 in your league, and you're kind of in the playoff. Does non-conference games no longer matter at all, other than for seeding? You could lose all of your conference games and still finish 4th in your league and make it. Do you even bother scheduling good teams, or do you schedule a ton of good teams? Like, are you better off sprinkling your non-conference games in the middle of your season to try to get like pseudo bye week? Like, you're changing the way college football is competed for off of a 1-year deal, where if Clemson doesn't hit this, how long was that field goal? 50 something yards, like,
50 some odd yards.
Yeah. If they don't hit the field goal, it's fine. I think the bigger issue, they've kind of created a straw man out of the committee. And yes, we have 13 people deciding the 12 teams. They're really only deciding 2 teams. The first 11 last year was not in doubt. Okay, first you had your conference champs, and then no one was sitting there saying, "Oh, Penn State shouldn't be in," or Tennessee. Like, of course, those teams are going to be in, right? They had good seasons; they deserve to be in. It just got down to the last bit. My bigger issue with the selection process is the weekly rankings that I don't think they should do.
Yeah,
and I think the committee, the playoffs, should get rid of the weekly rankings. It's a fun TV show. It's fun for people like us. I'm sure it's good for ESPN to get a little ratings pop, but. When you have the committee boxing themselves in on who they're ranking, after whatever it is, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, things like that, there's already a limited data because you have 134 teams playing 12 games, maybe 13 games. So you have limited data already. And when you box them in, you don't really get, I think, a full, holistic, fair bit at the end. And so when we went into the final weekend, you had Ward Manuel, who I think was following all the protocols, the Michigan AD, saying, look, there's nothing left to consider with Alabama. This is where they're at. There's nothing else to do. They've been boxed in. And so it's a matter of, can you drop somebody? SMU loses, you drop them all the way out. Indiana's not playing. Well, do we not drop them out? What do we do? It's basically Alabama, Indiana, and SMU, right? Those are the teams to choose. It shouldn't be a drop or a climb. It should just be, let's decide now who our top 12 is. And at that point, you can make a very good case at that point that Alabama deserved to be in the playoff over SMU. If you go back and do it. I'm not saying you do it, you don't. I don't really have a problem with the committee because somebody's got to pick this thing. Someone's going to have to decide, and someone's going to have to decide who's the 8 seed and the 9. Someone's going to have to decide this and that. It's just the nature of it. But if you have a more holistic, full approach and just have one committee meeting like they do in basketball, they kind of have like a little mock thing and they put out a top 4, but they don't do much. That's like a month ago. I think you have a better process. I would improve that process before we sit there and say, that's it. Let's change the fabric of how this sport is competed with. And that's my worry after 1 year of it. I think 12 is a great number. And I don't think anybody sat there at the end of that playoff and said, the problem was we didn't let more teams in. I think people said the seeding is a little clunky with this conference champ. Boy, it'd be cool if the quarterfinals were on campus. Was it really fair to Oregon to end up just with those were things that I heard all the people talking about, not at the end going, boy, it just stunk that Alabama didn't get in. What was Alabama going to do?
Right. JC?
Yeah, I think I like that idea actually, and with not having the rankings, because I believe that the flawed part of it was if I have a problem with the committee, the reason we go to 12 is to factor strength of schedule in, and they didn't. Obviously, if you look at the SEC teams that even made it, they had the Texas and Tennessee had the easiest SEC schedules. There was never even any debate about a Tennessee team at 10-2 who got to play Mississippi State, Kentucky, and some other bad team, versus Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Alabama, who played significantly tougher competition within the league. The imbalanced schedules have to be solved on the league's end, and I'm convinced that's why they're talking about play-ins to kind of solve that issue. But to your point, yes, they box themselves in, Dan, and I think you could even solve it and keep your made-for-TV special every week. We wouldn't have to listen to an hour of it, which would be good. Just go like old school stuff. You know how they do in basketball? They'll release the top 16.
Mm-hmm.
They'll say, all right, these are our 16. They're not going to 68. And that gets a lot of run. Just do the top 4 every week. Say these are our top 4. And if they do the seedings, they're going to be the top 4. Be like, right now, these are the 4 teams that we think are the top 4 in the country, just like they used to do in the 4-team era. And these are the teams that are going to get the bye. And you could take your TV. Go ahead.
Can I put my TV producer hat on? And Dan, you're gonna learn quickly.
I'm making this suggestion this week, not next week.
Yeah, well, as soon as you get that ESPN badge, your opinion might change.
The TV show is fine. I get 2 things. I get why ESPN wants a TV show. Of course, why not? It's the playoff that allows it. I get why the bowl games want to host all the games. Because why wouldn't you? That doesn't mean that the playoff it's just the playoff. There's a way to do the program. There's creative ways to do this.
I agree with both of you. Trust me.
Yeah.
I just know it's like
it's not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. Yeah. It's not going. If anything, they might start doing it in week 5. Who knows? Because it's programming, and we are college football, passionate fans first and foremost. Even though we're all in the business, we're gonna watch and we're gonna have an appetite for it. We're gonna complain about it. Sure. We're going to poke holes in it. I've suggested, and look, one of my favorite things that you did, because I used to yell and scream this on sports talk radio. You actually wrote a book about it. Was Death to the BCS. I find it comical when somebody tries to be a contrarian and go, "I tell you what, it was better when we just had the BCS." Based on what? What were you watching for 20 years?
The
They did not
Oregon
have the
Georgia
best
championship game would have been just
right.
dynamic, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it was real brilliance
It's
to
fun.
have an imbalanced matchup, but then have people go on and sound like they know what they're talking. Well, one played two, so it worked out. One played two based on what? That being said, I will say this, and you cover college basketball as well. For all the, I've never found a perfect computer poll. Guess what? I've never found a perfect human poll either. The net ranking, it's better than the RPI was. I like what the quad 1 through quad 4. I get it. Or excuse me. Yeah. Quad 1 through quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4. Not everybody finds that appetizing. It's kind of nerdy math type stuff. But I'll tell you what, it spits out better data than what anything in college football does. And I would suggest that college football gets together and finds something comparable that can discern kind of what JC was talking about, the imbalance of conference schedules within their own leagues, obviously the difference in non-conference schedules, and can spit out some data that it gives the committee an out in some respects. Like if it's close, the net doesn't determine everything, but the committee members are lying if they don't say they look at it to help break a tie. And maybe we could find something like that in college football, because right now we don't have it. No Sagarin or Massey or all these other polls were ever worth a damn. Maybe we can make one that actually is.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. I've been saying from the start, the committee, I did write that to the BCS, but I was in favor of a committee, because you have to, you just have to have it. You have to have
Agreed.
somebody make that hard case at the end. Someone's got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much, unless you want to go this other route, which I'll talk about. But they keep putting people on the committee. I'm always like, where's the money ball where it's the Jonas Hill, I think it's character, right? Where he's like
Jonah Hill, yeah.
Jonah Hill, right. I'm the econ major from Yale.
Mm-hmm.
And all right, we got another coach, but then the coaches, like Kirby Smart's like, these guys don't know anything about football. There was like 5 former coaches on the committee,
right?
It's like they get ripped. What? Like they weren't good enough coaches. Like, okay, we got to get better coach. Like who is this person that knows everything? I want a math person on there, a couple of them. One of the things that's interesting, I agree, the net rankings, the Ken Palm, they do better in basketball. Now there's more data, there's more games, that helps, but there's a lot of teams. Right. And what they did with those quads was, I remember one year, one of the problems was, you schedule, okay, we're going to have the game Tuesday before Thanksgiving. We're going to beat, we're just bringing somebody in. And that team ends up like 1-27. And they're they're 354th in the ranking. And it crushes you when you could have just played team 211 and got the same result, right? It was like too big of a thing. College hockey. Okay, so this is all under this is still the NCAA, including Ohio State and Boston College and Michigan State, and a lot of teams that also play big college football. College hockey is a thing called pairwise. They have a computer formula that essentially sets their tournament. That's it. Now they have a committee in case that pairwise goes haywire in some manner, and all of a sudden, an 8-20 team gets in. But for the most part, the pairwise rankings of the top 16 will be there's automatic bids, and then they shuffle it down. That's your tournament, and they're fine with it. Everyone likes it. And the college hockey fans, you win a game. Okay. So let's say, I don't know who's playing who, but let's say Wisconsin beat Michigan State's like number 2 in the country right now. Boston College, number 1. Let's say somebody beats Boston College this weekend in the Hockey East tournament. Immediately the fans will start they've figured out the formula. And they'll say, we're going to move up 3 spots in the pairwise. And so each night, it actually it's almost like a baseball race, right? We're now only a game and a half back. We're this or that. So in college hockey, which is, again, an NCAA sport, this isn't like I'm taking, people be like, the European soccer leagues, we should have promotion and regular. Okay, that's not happening. But like Ohio State's good with pairwise in hockey, but you mention a computer to college football people, and they think you're like, you want to stuff the ball instead of inflate it. They go, oh my God, we can't have a computer. It's like your other sports have computers. What's the issue here? So it seems like there's some ground where we could improve the selection process. And so this is my thing. If you're upset about the selection process, and again, you can make an absolute case that Alabama should have been in over SMU and maybe Indiana. You could say South Carolina. You could say Ole Miss, all sorts of stuff. I was fine with all those arguments. But let's make that process better before we just throw up our hands and say we can't do it. Let's have 4 automatic bids.
Right.
And basically, if you do the way they're going to probably do this, you don't just have 14 teams in this playoff. You basically have 22, because your 6th place team in the SEC or the Big Ten have got a chance to get in this. It's basically a play-in. The same way what we're seeing right now in men's basketball with all the conference tournaments, everybody has a shot. They want to expand that thing too. It's like we already have a 356 team whatever tournament. It's just they're playing the Horizon League and the Summit League now, right? Like, you can lose all your games and still get into March Madness. You just win your conference tournament. So we already have the play-in. We don't need more play-in. We're having play-ins to get in the play-ins. Sometimes I struggle.
I'm with you.
Like,
look,
can we just, oh my God.
Pump the brakes. So we need to pump the brakes a little bit. I don't think the SEC is going to the semifinal play-in. I think that there will be a lot of resistance to that. Other leagues that are a little bit on the desperate side might need to go to something that kind of gimmicky. I could be wrong. I know people disagree.
I don't agree with Mike.
That's okay. That's okay.
I think because you got to solve the scheduling issue in the SEC, and it's impossible to do it.
And the Big Ten. I mean,
yeah,
unless
you're going back to divisions, But
if we cool. Go to, here's what I do believe: we are going to go to 4 automatic bids for the SEC and Big Ten, whether it's right or wrong or indifferent. That's going to happen. So that means if there is a scheduling imbalance, which I don't care what you do, there's always going to be a scheduling imbalance. There's no perfect way to do this. Where some years Oklahoma is just going to have a much more difficult schedule than Texas. That's just going to happen. But it's up to smart people in a committee room. And again, using something like a net ranking as a guide to be able to determine the 2 teams that don't meet in Atlanta are qualified for those other 2 automatic bids to make it to the playoff. I don't think that's that hard.
I just don't think it's going to be – I just don't think it can be your top 4 in your standings if you're going to do one big division 1 through 18 and 16.
No, I'm not saying standings. I'm saying the committee –
Yeah. You want to pick it out large and use computers? That's fine with me too.
The committee has to be able to say this team that went 5-3 in the SEC is better than this team that went 6-2 in the SEC based on strength of schedule, quality wins, bad losses. You have to be able to do that. We do it in basketball every year. Why can't we do it in college football? Is that difficult?
Well, I think, one of the problems is we've not heard. It's not a great idea when no one's standing up saying this is what we should do. Okay.
Right.
So it's like this has been leaked out. We might do this, but you don't hear anything. So we have Tony Petitti of the Big Ten, and perhaps he's got the best explanation on why this should be done beyond the committee isn't good. I think that's a straw man. But Tony Petitti comes from baseball. So I think it's fair or not. It's reasonable for us to wonder how much did the Major League Baseball's background influence his thinking, okay? Maybe it's not at all. Maybe it's all the way. But we haven't heard enough to say one way or the other. So I think it's fair to say, okay, he's coming from baseball. Well, in baseball, the record is all that matters. But you play 162 games.
Yeah.
We have 134 teams playing 12 games. And we have the schedules are not even like the NFL where they're a little bit more dispersed and you have interplay. So there's really there's no good way to do this. There's no perfect way to do this.
Right.
And that would be my thing. I get there's always going to be someone upset. There's going to be some arguments. But at the end of the day, if you have 13 people and you improve the process and you get it as good as you can get, and someone's got to sit there at the end and say, this is like a coin flip. We're going this way. I'm not going to scream and pout. I'm going to say it's not a flaw. It's not a bug. It's a feature of the sport.
Can we all agree? Can we all agree? And I know a lot of athletic directors. I have respect for the jobs they do, but can we all agree they shouldn't be on the committee?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Why do I want an AD on the committee?
Well, then they have to leave the room if like a team.
Yeah,
this is the one I never understood, and I respect the heck out of these guys. This is not, but like if you're going to be the AD at Ohio State, why would you go you're going to be in the playoff every year,
right?
like that's not like I'd probably be better off if you just had the AD from I don't know wherever
Pepperdine.
Yeah, right, Pepperdine. But like, why? Like they were like, we got the AD from Ohio State. Like, they're in the playoff every year. So what's
It's a conflict of interest.
Why,
It's a no.
Why would you join a committee that you got to sit in the hallway for? Like,
right.
I'm like, what is this? I don't understand. Michigan chaired it last year, right? Well, okay, so last year was not the year Michigan was in the running, but almost every other year, they presumably will, or whatever, 3 out of 4 years they're going to be in the running. So there's just a lot. But I think that until we have worked and tinkered with this committee situation, why make such a dramatic step?
Well,
is my thing.
And then even reason like opinionated explanations when anybody can have an opinion. Ward Manuel last year when he's trying to explain the brutal toughness that was Indiana's football schedule, I say that sarcastically. He goes, and they beat Michigan and they beat Washington. Those are big wins. And Ole Miss is sitting there going, well, we beat Georgia. I mean, it's like, and I think
beating Michigan was a big win a year before.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody did.
And Washington too, the last year.
Right.
Curt Cignetti took that argument and used it talking about it, hey, we beat the national champions last year and the runners up. I think they're both 6 and 6.
And this is the BCS bit because that was a vote too. There was a poll. Yeah, and I had a chapter in the book that you mentioned, Mike, and it was like when Les Miles's wife came up with the concept. They had 2 losses, but they're both in overtime, and she invented the idea. Undefeated in regular season. Regulation time. I'm sorry, undefeated in regulation time, and it worked.
And
they got in and won the title. So
because they lost to Kentucky and Arkansas, I believe,
and OT.
Multiple overtimes.
And Arkansas was late too. It was Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah,
late.
They almost blew it, but she had a moment of genius, and it's like, okay,
wow,
this is how dumb this system is. We're down to like clever marketing tricks, and it worked. People I'm like, wow, that's a good point.
The Mrs. Miles Index.
Yeah,
that whole year was dumb. That whole
nobody.
07 was one of the dumbest years in the history of college. Everybody lost. Pat White and West Virginia go down to Pitt at home, 13-9. South Florida was number 2 in the country at one point.
Boston College was number 2, I think.
Matt Ryan was that Matt Ryan team. I mean, that was just. 07, you could write some books about 07. That was a crazy year. So Les Miles' wife with because man, I still think that sometimes. I'm like, well, the one loss was in overtime. I mean, it kind of became part of the. Oh man, I didn't. That's hilarious.
All right, so we get rid of ADs,
but this is just real quick. This is the fun part. This is the feature, not a bug. Stop trying to solve. College football is inherently ridiculous. It's ridiculous. That's what we like.
Right.
You can't make it perfect. It's not an accounting.
No.
Trick.
That's
who the heck has 134 teams playing for one championship.
Right. And for 100 years, we called it the mythical national championship for a reason. We had shared titles. We had multiple polls deciding who gets which.
How about the AP poll in 1936? What was that? They were getting scores over the telegram. Oklahoma looks good. Why? You never saw them. You're a newspaper reporter in Raleigh.
They beat Harvard by 10. Yeah,
guys named Scoop and Skip and
Scoop McGee here. You had to go play in New York to get more votes.
That's right. That's right. No, I've always said, if you ever wanted to find a sport that was Teflon, that with all its flaws still succeeds because we love it so much, it's college football.
Yeah.
Because it's been heavily flawed for as long as it's been a thing, and it's still heavily flawed in some respects. Although I do think it's improving. I'll take this over the BCS any day.
Absolutely.
If we're complaining about who the 12th team was and who's on the committee and whatnot, that's okay. Let me go back to one other thing that was proposed in that article, and that is. Do you see a world where the SEC and Big Ten play a game against one another, kind of like in basketball for 20 years? It was the SEC Big 12 Challenge. Now it's the SEC ACC Challenge. If you have a setup where strength of schedule allows you to take an extra loss here and there, it might be more attractive. Maybe the fans have an appetite for it. Maybe the coaches don't. I don't know. But what do you see there? Because it was certainly broached in the article.
So we'll see. First off, I don't know that it necessarily creates better strength of schedule. It sounds reasonable because you're like, oh, we'll play Ohio State. Well, no, Georgia's going to play Ohio State. And I'm all for that. Like this year, we have Texas as Ohio State already playing. I think Michigan's playing maybe Arkansas. Like they're already in some of those games. Pretty quickly, you get down the line and you're playing Minnesota or something like that. And it's like, did we really get a better schedule? I think the real thing is within the SEC. You had the 4 SEC, ACC rivalry games, right? South Carolina, Clemson, Kentucky, Louisville, Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech. Does it put those games at risk just because we want to prove a point that we're the 2 big dogs here? If I'm a South Carolina fan, are you interested in potentially losing the rivalry game between Clemson so you can play Iowa every year?
No,
home
I don't
and
think
away.
that's happening.
I right? Like, no. Would it make it easier? Is everything about spreadsheets and stuff, or is it about my neighbor went to Clemson and we want to win? Like, what is this sport? Don't get rid of those. Like, don't put those games at risk.
Right.
Just so we can, like, something got cooked up in a boardroom and you're like, oh, this will be much better. Big Ten. Like, really? Who does South Carolina want to play in the Big Ten that's going to be so exciting? Because you're not getting, if you're matching this thing up even on, strength on strength, maybe this year, South Carolina's, I mean, they got a really good team, right? So we'll see.
Maybe Iowa or something.
Right. But they're probably not, as they schedule it out, what TV wants. Okay, this is a TV event. They don't want Ohio State, South Carolina. They want Ohio State, Georgia. They want Michigan, Alabama. They want Penn State, I don't know, whatever, LSU. And then pretty quickly on both leagues, you get into places where you might have good programs. Iowa's a great program, right? But are your fans outside of that region excited when they're showing up?
Right.
So that's what I wonder whether that'll go. I have a lot of faith in, Greg Sankey is pretty calm on a lot of stuff. And there's a lot gets buzzed out, but until he actually talks about stuff, I'm not really sure that he's that much in favor of it. So are you look at a Georgia? They already play Georgia Tech, and then they scheduled Clemson, right? They had a Clemson thing. If I'm a Georgia fan, I'd rather play Clemson. That's my backyard kind of neighbor thing than I would someone in the Big Ten. So be careful of those things. I do like scheduling agreements. I wish the Big Ten at one point they had proposed one with the Pac-12 and they had just done that. They didn't need to destroy the Pac-12, or the Pac-12 didn't need to get destroyed. You could just have a scheduling agreement, because that's really all you're trying to do is get one more Oregon, Michigan game, or and so we'll see. But I would much prefer open scheduling. You also got to get the SEC to want to go to 9 games. There's just a lot to this thing. You're going to lose a home game. You're going to lose that money. There's a lot of factors that go in.
I mean, think if you're the Florida Gators and Florida State is up, and you go, so you've got 9 SEC games, plus Florida State, who's up, plus a Big Ten opponent. Florida is the type of brand that would probably get sent to Penn State or get Penn State to come in. And so you got really one cupcake. Fans don't like cupcakes. Media doesn't like cupcakes. TV doesn't like cupcakes. But they're good for players and coaches because you get players in the game that don't normally play. You kind of get some rest. With no exhibition games in college football, they do serve a purpose that maybe we all don't care about. But that's still compared to other.
You're talking about trying to make a playoff now.
Yeah,
now the non-conference games don't matter. But like you take Florida last year, they played Florida State and Miami,
and UCF.
And UCF. So if you're a Florida fan or you're a fan of college football at all, do you want to see Florida not be able to play? Okay, so let's say they keep the FSU game because it's just such a big rivalry. Fine. Now you've already got your 9 SEC games, your 10th. You're not going to play Miami anymore.
No.
Well, as a fan of college, I don't have any ties or allegiance to either of those 2 schools, but I like when they play.
Right.
Or would you rather Florida's playing a Big Ten team just because that's the Big Ten? Like,
right.
No, I'd rather watch Florida play Miami and they have a home and home, or UCF or whatever. And so you're going to lose something. And it sounds great in theory because of the way the trick goes, but pretty quickly you're like, well, what did we just lose? And that's what I don't want to see.
Oh, I see your point on that. It almost feels like an either or. You either go to 9 conference games or you keep it at 8 if you want to do kind of a Big Ten invitational,
right.
Where you still have a little more flexibility on the scheduling. The other big subject I know you guys were in on, and that is this whole debacle that is the lawsuits in the ACC from Florida State and Clemson. It looks like we have a resolution to that, and they, unlike the SEC, which is like 16 equal pieces of the pie, it's not going to be like that at all. It's almost going to be like the old days of the Big 12, where there were special concessions for Texas, and now the most successful, even if I'm reading this right, it's not just based on most successful, even like the teams that have the most eyeballs, the teams that actually draw the most will get more money. Do you think that's going to keep everybody happy, or do you think Clemson and Florida State are still in the plane with a parachute on their back and ready to jump ship?
If they get a target, they're jumping, right?
Yeah.
They just need one of these, the Big Ten or the SEC to say, come join us.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, there is not that interest. Now, if they were available, maybe there would be. But there is a breaking point. It may already have been done, especially in the Big Ten. I mean, you're at 18 teams. The AFC and the NFC have 16.
Right.
Like, what do we, like at what at what point is too many? So we'll see. But money is money. Generally, it'll happen. It's about television ratings in a big thing, and that to me is wild. I've always said, I always say a lot on our show, and I've always said one of the biggest tricks college sports has done is got their fans to root for revenue. Like, fans will sit there and brag about how much more revenue we have. It's like, well, Purdue makes more money than Clemson from conference revenue. Whose program would you rather root for?
Right.
Like, whatever. Money doesn't automatically. Florida State, it spends more money on football than other teams. They went 2-10. You just don't know. The year before they were good. This year they're not. What they're doing though is if we bring more eyeballs, they'll rank them down, and you'll get a proportion. And so obviously that's going to favor Florida State and Clemson and maybe anybody who gets good, not only because they have the most fans and bring the most, they also play, as you said, as we were just saying, bigger games, right? And in an interesting twist just before, which kind of feels like a chess move, they set up a deal where Notre Dame will play either every year. Notre Dame will play two of the following three: Florida State, Clemson, and Miami. Well, Notre Dame is an automatic ratings win every single time. Even when they weren't good, they brought the big ratings. So those teams have an inherent advantage of getting a game 2 out of every 3 years with Notre Dame that a Wake Forest, a Boston College, a Syracuse, those schools already don't have. So it is now based on how popular your team is, not necessarily how successful. SMU was more successful than Florida State last year, but SMU is not going to get those kind of rankings in the future. Now, I will converse this on the side, because I don't love this. At the same time, they allowed a lot of teams to get into a league that drafted off the big brands, and they got in because of TV markets, right? Why is Boston College in the ACC? Because they have the Boston TV market. Well, they are in Boston TV market, but they are not the Patriots or the Red Sox or the Celtics. Yeah. So do they really bring anything? It's been 20 years they've been in the league. Have they made the Boston an ACC town like Raleigh is? No, they have not. So in some ways, these other schools have benefited from a different bit of television, however you want to put it. Television benefited some of these other schools for a long time also. So I do see both sides of this argument, but mainly the ACC is just trying to say, look, let's give it 5 years. Let's see where we're at 5-6 years until possible realignment hits big. And can we get these? Because it may be Clemson and Florida State making $20 million more and being pretty close to what the SEC and Big Ten teams are making, and having an easier path to 11, 10-win seasons that can get them in the playoff. Might say, hey, this is better than jumping into an SEC dogfight where I don't know how often we're going to be able to make it.
Well, and as you pointed out, there is no landing spot right now for either one of those programs. They put it out there, and it's like the guy that keeps sending the girl flowers and chocolates and sweet notes, and she's like, "Yeah, I see you as a friend." And that's the Big Ten and SEC right now.
I did not know we were going to discuss my high school years on the show today, but
we did a little.
We
did a little background, Dan, and let's just say before you became a best-selling author and writer, now those same ladies, they would clearly
sure.
just knock on the door and say,
Look at me
please,
now.
Dan.
Look what you missed. Yeah, look what you missed out.
But
a guy who can talk college football and drop of a hat for 40 minutes.
I got
Women love
What
that.
more would you want out of a?
I can tell you all about the BCS. How sexy is that?
Let me tell you about this computer ranking formula, man.
Want to talk some automatic bids? I'm your guy.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Hey, I got one more thing because I know we're running up against it here.
Yep.
And I have this whole theory. We're going into the revenue share thing, and I'm sure you're well versed in all that. It changes every week, but it's interesting. So here's the thing: college basketball, and if this holds, the House settlement holds, I personally think it's going to take an act of Congress to avoid litigation and sort of the unlimited non-NIL stuff. But if it holds, it's going to be interesting because you have SEC basketball programs spending $6-7 million and 15 in football, and that's under. They're not going to be able to do that, right? Auburn, for example, put out a release where $25 million investment for student athletes, and those numbers don't compute when you're talking about both major sports right now. So assuming that happens, and the SEC, all the football schools have to kind of adjust and divvy up the pie. What do you think about like the Big East basketball programs? Because those TV deals are not chump change. St. John's, according to my calculations, with Rick Pitino in the New York City TV market, where you do have legit premium NIL opportunities, they're starting at 5.6 in rev share only and going up from there. They play Madison Square Garden, and I think Pitino's going to coach till he dies. Oh yeah. Those types of situations, could we see the Big East back and basketball schools take over that sport, similar to how everybody thinks the Big Ten and SEC football schools are taking over that one because of money and the ability to sink money into the other revenue sport?
Well, I would say, the Big East won, I think, 4 of the last 8 national titles, including the last 2.
Oh yeah,
they're kind of
good.
I
love the Big East.
But yes, absolutely, I think it would be advantageous to that, and also the quote unquote this whole real NIL. Obviously, at a basketball school, you can make those arguments. Let's take Gonzaga. Okay, let's take it out of New York City. The biggest star in Spokane, Washington would be the best player at Gonzaga, right? So he would get the car dealership and maybe there are real TV commercials to be had for that. Where no matter how good the basketball team is at Auburn, maybe, but it takes a lot to be the biggest star in that market. It would take a lot.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So Cooper, different places. Yes, I think you get into that. I like NIL being spend what you want, because this is what I think, especially in basketball, particularly. Look at the teams in this in the top 10. They didn't look like this 6 years ago. Iowa State can be good. Houston can be good, right? Kansas won every single Big 12 title, right? The Blue Bloods no longer have the Blue Bloods. All these SEC programs that invest in and have the passionate fans that couldn't get good enough for 40 years. For a long time, college basketball players that were supposedly pining to go back to, Nike and Adidas controlled where most of the top players went. Mm-hmm. They stocked the teams based on whether you had a shoe deal and you were deemed a blue blood. Blue blood was just a good shoe contract.
Right.
And now it's wide open, and Auburn and Alabama can sit there and anybody else. Tennessee's always had a very good basketball program, but they can take that next jump. If you want to, Iowa State cares a great deal about college basketball. Well, you're good enough now, and you can do it. Houston, all these things. And there's all this bit of, well, you can't, this is crazy, and it's impossible to coach. Look who won these leagues. Okay. 72-year-old Rick Pitino won the Big East by like 3 games. 70-year Tom Izzo. Is this Tom Izzo's not old school enough for you? He won the Big Ten by 3 games.
I love that.
Kelvin Sampson, 69 years old. The only guy tougher than Izzo, Sampson. He won the Big 12 by 4 games. Bruce
65?
Pearl, 65 years old.
Yeah.
Old school coach. Rick Barnes at Tennessee, 70 years old. He's got easily a Final Four contending team.
Right.
Yes, you can do it. This whole bit where like, oh, these old coaches got to quit. No one can do this. Well, look who just dominated. Other than 38-year-old John Shire at Duke, every league got won by a guy who could be, sorry, Bruce Pearl, he's a young one on this, but, could be retired.
Yeah.
So,
No,
what's the problem?
No, nothing. And that's the thing I think people love about the college basketball tournament and in general compared to college football, where it's the rich get richer. It seems like we're talking about the same handful of teams every year competing. The day and age where a John Calipari could turn over the apple cart, dominate McDonald's All-Americans, and go to a bunch of Final Fours and contend for titles based on the best 19-year-old freshmen, those are done.
No.
Duke is the one team that's not old that's really good this year. Everybody else is chock full of 21, 22, 23-year-olds. That's what wins in basketball,
Yep.
and that opens the door to more programs having a chance to compete. And with that, one quick hitter before we let you out, because next time we'll have you on, certainly talk some more hoops, but your Final Four. We're coming up. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I just did. You obviously have been keeping up with everything. You got 4 teams that you like in San Antonio? It was a lot easier to answer those football BCS questions.
Yeah, you got me on this, man.
Well, give me one team. Let's start with that. Who's the best team?
Let me say this. Okay, so I don't know about the final. I don't. I can list off the general. I mean, I love this. This Duke team is terrific.
They're unbelievable. Yeah.
Okay. I love Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way these top teams play defense. That's the other thing. For all the bit, you can't coach them. Like, look at these teams. So what the way they play defense, it's incredible. I think Auburn. I do like Tennessee. I think Tennessee's like a little bit sneaky in there.
Okay.
And I think Houston is a real contender. I love how he set it up, and they might be able to win it. So I would give those would be my 4. But to your point on how it's a different era, like Pitino said, I not even want a 5-star. Now Pitino's always full of it. Okay, Cooper Flag, the next Cooper. Yeah, you're taking Cooper Flag.
You're taking him.
But his point makes sense. This is my favorite team for March. If you want a team, the Drake Bulldogs. The Drake Bulldogs last year had 15 kids leave the program after a coaching change. 12 transferred, two graduated, one just kind of stopped playing basketball. They hire Ben McCollum, a Division II, won 4 national titles at Division II, Northwest Missouri State. He has to build a new program. He takes 4 guys from his Division II team, brings them to Drake. They're 4 of the starters. He gets a junior college transfer. He gets 2 high school recruits, and he's got 2 guys that came in from Wyoming. So 7 of the 9 players who played had never played Division I before, and then there's the head coach. They're 30-3. They won the Valley by 2 games.
I was going to ask her. They still in the Missouri Valley?
Yeah, they won the Valley. Now, the Valley has had 2 Final Four teams in recent years, Wichita State and Loyola. They always are getting team. This is a real league. This isn't like your 16 seed.
Right.
You can go find players. You don't have to do McDonald's All-Americans. It's a Division II team in Division I winning 30 games. I love it. I love that these kids that were told out of high school, you're too skinny, you're this, you're that. You're not Division I. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah? Well, look out. This is my favorite team of March. So to your point, you just got to find players. You just got to find them differently. And it's not the way it used to be. And I think college basketball is more interesting than ever. And as much as there's the belly aching about NIL's ruined it, how? Where? What is the problem?
No, I totally agree. It is no longer the most 5 stars that win. Whereas in college
Nike
football,
controlled those guys.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, if you weren't a Nike, you were up the creek without a paddle if you weren't a Nike school. In college football, I'll put my money on the team that has the most 5 stars, the most first-round draft picks. Sport. College basketball, not so much. So I think that makes it really intriguing. Sounds to me like it could be an article on ESPN.com in the near future.
That's a great plan.
I work for Yahoo, man.
I'm sorry. And the great work for the next few days that you'll do for Yahoo.
Yeah. I'm a helmet head, and I'm a football guy, but I love this basketball. This basketball discussion's been awesome. So I appreciate it.
It's been a fun season.
It really has.
Yeah.
Why can't Alabama and Auburn have the game of the week? Why did it always have to be Duke Carolina? Like, what's wrong with
I think what you're going to see more often is a lot more game days going to places like that.
Yeah.
Like Gainesville, like non-traditional power play. You don't Duke, North Carolina is not always the biggest game. Certainly not this year.
Right.
Not this year at all. It wasn't even competitive. And I, for years and years, Dan, you wouldn't know this, but I've been screaming from the mountaintop. There's no reason why the SEC can't be good in football and basketball.
Exactly.
And this year they've had a historical run. They'll ultimately be judged by what they do in March. If they spit the bit in the first 2 rounds and 13 bids goes to like only 2 left in the second weekend, then everybody will pile on because they have SEC fatigue now in basketball, not just football. But it does go to show you that there's always room for more in the party in college basketball. Dan, we really appreciate you being a part of this party. I know you were obviously swamped last week. Couldn't be happier for you. You've always done outstanding work, and we always appreciate you taking the time on this show. So thank you much, and hopefully you won't be a stranger now at your new address.
I will not. Appreciate it, Mike, JC. Really
Thanks,
appreciate
Dan.
it. Thank you.
He is Dan Wetzel, soon to be with ESPN, as we bid farewell here. Some final thoughts. Sure. Oh, let me just say this real quick on a couple of the Sam Murphy. Yes, I love the Karate Kid breakdown the other week. I had a lot of response on that, on the Fiver Dimer discussion and the breakdown between 1, 2, and 3. We'll get back to that next week for sure. Office Space, Dimer. There's something about Mary. Also a dime piece for me, JC. We quote those movies all the time. Those are definite remote droppers. You mentioned, you talked about Greg's comments about tampering and excessive open evaluation. I think you answered that pretty well. Hayne asked me if you ever wanted to be a sports anchor, like at a news station. No, that was never my desire. My desire was to do play-by-play and to do what we do right here, which is sports talk. And now with this format, it allows you to do it in a better way, I think, than ever before. So great question, Hayne. But no, I never wanted to be a Sports Center anchor. A lot of my friends in J school across the country wanted to be the next Dan Patrick. That was not for me, reading a teleprompter. I did some of it, but I don't like reading prompters.
If I heard you, which I heard you before I met you, I would think that guy could probably be a Sports Center, like an anchor and all that.
I like to think I could do it.
Talent-wise, you could. But after I met you, no way in hell.
Yeah, it's just
not you. It's just not you, dude.
I don't like
not you.
Yeah, I don't like these parameters and everything is so regimented. I like things on the fly, man. It's what I love about games. We don't know what's going to happen. Everything is extemporaneous, and even on this show, like when you come up with the JC5, I think people assume that we had this long production meeting and I have no idea what you're going to ask. And I like it that way. Yeah. JC, in closing, for the people that like to catch more of this fine program, how do you recommend they do so?
Chief Sports app is the best way. If you want to catch it live, it's downloadable on Google Play and also the Apple App Store. On podcast, the podcast version comes out depending on when the streaming platform, YouTube, will let me download it to make the audio to put it up on Spotify, Apple, Audible, iHeart, Google Play, Podcast Mania, Podbean, wherever you get podcasts, you can get us. That comes up within 24 hours after the live show. And certainly we have a large audience there. Check us out on social media, on Instagram at JC and Morgan. jcandmorgan.com, which will have a new look here in the next few months. And also you can go on YouTube, and the theme song is there's a music video of the theme song. If you go on YouTube and search that out, you can find the theme song and also find where we stream it on YouTube. We're going to be streaming on multiple YouTube channels, and I'll explain that as we get forward so people can go subscribe to the YouTube, the other YouTube channel, which will eventually be, a big full service college football oriented, big picture college football oriented channel, along with a website and all that. So that's all coming. We're excited about building it out and moving it forward. But when you got guests like Dan Wetzel, man, right here in March, 70-degree weather in Chicago, I feel like I'm home, man. I wish I had a beer and a bowl of peanuts and hearing the March Madness theme song, you know.
Amen. Well,
Yeah,
we're
a
not
lot-
too far off.
Reminds me, we're live from the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia. Vern Lundquist. Today, Creighton plays, you know, but anyway.
Another great guest here on JC and Morgan.
Yeah,
that we
you
had,
can catch all those. But
a year
yeah,
ago. How good was Jerry? How good was Dan Wetzel? How good was? I mean, always brings it. Outstanding stuff. So
he was one of our better interviews last spring, and I know we've been meaning to get him on, but different perspective. You know, we're based out a large amount of our audience and attention is based in the South, and he's not based in the South, so you know he likes talking about Boston College and you know other Minnesota and other. I like that he gives love to some of the non-blue blood programs and actually appreciates when some of these changes do benefit, you know, programs like Iowa State, like you mentioned for basketball and stuff. I appreciate that about him.
Yeah, we had kind of the Civil War version of guests here the last 2 weeks. We had Dan Wetzel representing the North, and it doesn't get more Southern than Tony Barnhart last week. So we gave you the perspective from each side. Maybe one day we'll find somebody out there in California that knows anything at all about college football and basketball as well. We shall see. Again, our thanks to our producer working double duty right now, Mad Dog Phil Molinax, and of course our sponsors, MG&A Wealth, MGAwealth.com for all your financial needs, financial planning, NestandWildMattress.com for the most comfortable mattress on the planet, Palm Casual Furniture, speaking of most comfortable, for those of you in the Southeast, from South Carolina to Florida, if you're looking for the very best in patio furniture, don't save money on Amazon. It's going to be broken and torn to shreds inside of a few months. Go to Palm Casual. That will do it for us. We'll see you next week. We may have another great guest in store. We shall see. For JC, for Mad Dog, this is Mike saying so long. Thanks for tuning in to another installment of JC and Morgan.